And it's episode 13 of the Unnamed Real Estate Podcast. My name's Ray Dawson. I'm associate broker at ProStar Realty. So, 13. Wow, I'm sticking with this podcast longer than I've stuck to some of my relationships. So, this week I had about 2 or 3 things I wanted to talk about. There was part of me that wanted to talk about tenants and how tenants really, really screw up your listings and really, really screw up when you're trying to see a place to get under contract. But the tenant has certain rights when the owner is trying to sell a house. And one of those rights is they don't have to let anybody in unless they have at least 48 hours notice. This is inconvenient if you're a buyer. It's more inconvenient if you're the tenant. And a lot of times people are trying to figure out why they can't see inside a house. And the reason why you can't see inside the house is because you're asking a family to get up and leave for up to 30 minutes so you can see a place. And eventually they wind up out on the street. So you can understand there's going to be a little bit of tension there. I really prefer it if a landlord, when they were selling a place, moves the tenant out first, goes in there, cleans the place up. The buyers don't have that uncertitude of what happens if the tenant is still there when I move in. How long does the lease go on this property? Am I not going to be able to take possession immediately because there's a tenant who has rights to it for that amount of time? And that was going to be a really long conversation because I've seen people on both sides of the equation on here, and there is a lot of tenants out there who are just suddenly getting the notice. It starts like this. Hey, Joey, hey, thanks for this month's rent. You've been a great tenant for these last 10 years. Just to let you know, we're sort of kicking the idea around about selling the place. And then a month later, it's like, hi, we sold the place. You have 30 days to get out. So that's going to be a whole longer episode, I think, because that's when I really can get into some great detail on. But this week I decided to go with something different. All right. The housing market is really, really insane right now. Everybody knows that. A lot of people are starting to ask me that famous question of, how much do you think my house is? A lot. Your house is worth a lot. Going to need a little bit more details before I give you a more detailed answer. And a lot of that has to do with, when did you buy it? Have you done anything to it? But just to start, let's do a hypothetical situation, all right? I did some research for this, and I found this really great little a lot of different numbers out there, a lot of different numbers. One that seemed more true to me was one where they were saying in the last 10 years, Phoenix real estate has appreciated 138% over the last 10 years. That comes to about 9% a year. Now, it wasn't 9% every year consistently. Remember, 10 years ago was 2011. We were still at the bottom of the trough after the crash and everything, but it really didn't start picking up until about 2012, 2013. So that was a great time to buy. I mean, if you bought in at 2011, you're sitting pretty right now. In the course of that time since that, we've had a year, I remember 2013 was really, really hot. We went up like 20%. All right, and we're constantly looking at different averages going on. I mentioned last week that I just heard an appraiser say that we'd gone up a full 4% just in March alone. Last year was supposedly anywhere between 12 to 18%, and so I ran some numbers to see what was going on out there. So to check this out, what I did is I went into the MLS and I did a search for properties that closed back in April of 2011. And I scrolled down and went strictly to the houses that had actually sold for exactly $250,000. And I found about 5 or 6 of them. If you had worked out 9% appreciation, in 2021 on a house that you bought in 2011, it should be at $592,000. All right. So bought it 10 years ago at $250,000. Now it's worth $592,000. And then I apply the scientific method of raised reality adjustment. And what your RRA does is it goes in there and realizes that 9% is an average, and that means that certain neighborhoods that really, really blew up are going to have appreciated more, and certain neighborhoods that didn't blow up are going to appreciate less. So I found out that going through there that you could say that 500,000 was a pretty good adjustment off of that. Some of them went higher. I mean, I saw a couple of them in the 600s. All right, and I saw a couple of them, that were still, in the high fours, 475, 495. So averaging it out to something that was really close to about 500. So if you're sitting in a house right now that you bought in 2011, and it's time for you to move, you have a life change event, whatever, house is too small, too big, however you want to go about that point. If you were to sell it on the open market today at 500, and you got it under contract at 500, after your closing costs and commissions and everything like that, you would have about 465,000 left. Now, I calculated the payoff if somebody had borrowed a whole $250,000. Let's say you had a VA loan and you didn't have to put any money down. Nice thing about when you're doing the loan payoff tables is it's always the same regardless of the interest rate, because you're always making a principal payment, and your interest rate can be higher or lower, but that payment to principal is always going to be the same, so they can have the whole thing paid off when you hit the end of your 30-day payment period. So if you borrow $250,000 back in 2011, you have a payoff, meaning money you still owe, of $198,000. This comes to $267,000 in the bank. So after that, after your payoff, selling the house that you bought in 2011, you would have $267,000. What does one do with $267,000? You can do pretty much anything you want with that. But I'd strongly encourage you to find housing at that price point. All right? Because housing is a necessity unless you want to live in a van down by the river. And I know a guy who's got a van for sale right now, and you could deck it out really nice. We don't have a lot of river going on around here, but you could find something. So if you're that person who's sitting there and you bought a house 10 years ago, and it's time for, you have your family, your household has changed, right? Kids are all launched, kids are gone. This is when people traditionally start looking at downsizing. So with the $267,000, that would get you a really seriously healthy down payment in one of the 55 and older communities, or even just a smaller place. Those 250s that I was looking at, those were all 4 bedrooms. A couple of them were 5 bedrooms. If it's just you and another person, or just you don't need any space that big. So you start reallocating and start dealing with what your housing expenditures are, especially if you're looking at going into a fixed income when it's retirement time. There's no real reason for you to continue on paying for more house than you actually need. A lot of people, when they start looking at retirement, they start looking at, okay, how do we reduce our home expenditures? In this particular case, you still got 20 years left on that loan, whatever your mortgage payment was going to be. Right, and you're going into retirement right now. That's 20 years, right? So until you're about 85 or so, 87, 82 if you're retiring early. That's still going to be a big chunk of your monthly net. So, and that's why people start looking at downsizing. With $267,000, if you were to pair that with the reverse mortgage, like we were talking to Jim about a couple weeks ago, he's like, I think it was my first interview, you could, if at 62, 65, and I think it goes into effect at 62, if you're retiring, let's say you played the long game and you're retiring at 67, you could borrow pretty much 50% against that. So your 267 purchase is now worth, 500 and change. Your kids won't like you. All right. Kids are, your heirs to your estate are going to be watching you spend their inheritance, but hey, that's your money. That's not their money. Then you go out there and get their own money. The more important thing about that is you are reducing your monthly expenditures to reflect a potential lower income. So, in case you haven't noticed, I am not a financial advisor. All right, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a brain surgeon. I'm a real estate agent with a microphone and a mouth. All right, so go talk to your financial advisors about these things. But when you're looking at that situation, and it's like, okay, well, last kid just launched, or worse, last kid's about to graduate college, and they're starting to make noise about moving back in with us until they find themselves. It might be a really good time to downsize and get rid of that spare bedroom. Otherwise, who knows who's going to show up in that. So that's the first experience on this. Now, this also works on the other side of the equation. If you have gotten married in the last 10 years. Single person just bought himself $250,000 house back in 2011. And now it's 2021. They've gotten married. They got a couple kids. They're looking for expansion. And now they're currently living in a $592,000 house, $500 with raise adjustment. And if they need something else, well, that's $267,000 they can put down, right? Which would really, really do well in today's market where you have people bidding over asking. And so if you're in that place, you are in more of a position to buy than you think. The biggest question that we're getting from everybody is like, where am I supposed to go after I sell my house? And that's why we have partnered with a couple lenders who, regardless of your current debt owed on your current property, they will loan you the money for your purchase of your new home and allow you to sell your current home after you've secured a place to stay. This seems to be the number one thing we're hearing from people who are selling. They just don't know where they're going to go when it's time for them to go. And this answers that question. So if you are starting to consider something like this, and if you're thinking along these ways, I got a pretty good streamlined system right now where I can get you a good, reliable, comp and market estimate of what your house would be. And you can take that to your financial guy. You take that to your financial advisor. If you're looking at retirement and downsizing, or if you're looking at upsizing, you can see if the numbers are going to work for you. So give me a call. Number's going to be below. My email's going to be below. And we're going to finish up the rest of this episode with the monthly numbers, or the weekly numbers. But thank you very much for watching. And here's the numbers for April 28th, 2021. Our actives were 4,217 this morning, which is up 28 from last week. Our pendings are 2,018, which is up 145 from last week. We've had 2,283 closed last week, which is up 243, reflecting the end of the month. Our under contract with backups, we had a new 1,249 of those, which is 95 less than the week before. And our contracts with buyer contingency are at 86, which is no change from the week before. Our coming soons, we have a new 1,018 coming soons, which we'll be seeing coming on the market in the next week to week and a half.